What's going on, man? Welcome back to the basement. I'm Ron. Now, this is usually a fantasy football channel. As you guys can see, rec by Underdog Fantasy, the boys, the biggest sponsorship for this channel. But one of my colleagues at Underdog Fantasy, Josh Norris, he submitted his mock draft for the accuracy competition on the Huddle Report. It's like the industry standard for mock draft accuracy stuff. And he had not only the most accurate mock draft of 2021, but the most accurate mock draft they have ever charted. So I figured if we're going to come out here and do a YouTube video for an NFL mock draft where I'm going to try and predict picks, why not throw my hat in the ring and come for Josh Norris's throne? So that's what this is today. This is not who I think the best player is or what I think each team should do, but what I think is the best representation of what will happen tomorrow on draft day. I am telling you guys, I don't know if you guys can see the bags under my eyes. I seem a little bit all over the place. I stayed up till like 3 a.m. last night listening to podcasts, buying subscriptions on like The Athletic, ESPN Plus, reading things, hopping in Twitter spaces of NFL fan bases. I have absorbed all of the information possible. So I'm ready to go. With that being said, I'm going to fire up the PFF mock draft simulator, and I'll see you guys after the intro. Let's go.
Thirsty, trying to choose. I know I'm pretty cool. My nitty babe.
So here we are, the PFF mock draft simulator. Now let's start up this draft. 101, we have the Jaguars. And this is a spot where last time I was on here, I picked Aiden Hutchinson. And I had no hesitation with that at all. I thought he was pretty much the locked and loaded 101. He was minus 250 at that time. Fast forward to today, and he is now like plus 200 to go first overall. And now Trayvon Walker is minus 300. And pretty much what the buzz around the league is that Trent Baalke, the GM for the Jaguars, he's very much a traits over production guy for these edge rushers, especially with a guy like Trayvon Walker, who is massive wingspan, crazy athlete at Georgia. He didn't have a ton of sacks, but what I will say on like in defense of Trayvon Walker is that he was asked in that Georgia system where they rotate guys constantly. They had a really weird scheme where they didn't really want to get sacks, but they just wanted to kind of contain a quarterback and not let them scramble out and, you know, just force them to beat their coverage pretty much. So he was kind of put in a weird role. He does have, you know, a lot of upside with his athleticism. He kind of does look like Aldon Smith, a guy who Trent Baalke drafted once upon a time. On the other hand, Aiden Hutchinson is the opposite. He's not that, you know, like raw, projectable upside guy. He is very much a high floor player, and he has like very short arms and a short wingspan, which doesn't really fit what Trent Baalke wants. So here at minus 300, I'm going to go chalk at this point, which is pretty crazy to even call this chalk, but Trayvon Walker 101. It'd be like one of the craziest first overall picks ever. Like he is such here's the thing. I'm not a defensive line like scout. I haven't even like watched Trayvon Walker film, but from what I've heard, it seems like he is one of the most like project / like we haven't seen what we're drafting yet first overall pick ever. Like he is not Myles Garrett, Chase Young, the Bosas. He is like maybe one of them down the line. Now after that is where I think it gets juicy, because I think a lot of people are going to want to just shove Aiden Hutchinson in here, and I think that makes sense. But if Aiden Hutchinson went first overall, I would take Thibodeaux at 2 with no hesitation. All of the buzz out of Detroit has been Kayvon Thibodeaux all along. It's just recently that it's changed since Aiden Hutchinson got added to the mix. And when you look at the odds, Thibodeaux is plus 130, Hutchinson is minus 125. So it's really not a big discrepancy. The reason I lean Aiden Hutchinson is because the Lions are apparently transitioning to like a 4-3 defense, which is what Aiden Hutchinson fits a little bit more, where he's not rushing out of a 2-point stance. And he also fits that Detroit culture of Dan Campbell and biting kneecaps and wanting guys that want to come in every day and build this culture. He played at Michigan, Detroit. It's like literally right there. It just makes too much sense for it not to be number 2 overall. I will say though, in this accuracy competition, I probably should have just taken Thibodeaux here, because if you take Thibodeaux at 2, you can kind of differentiate yourself a little bit in terms of like that competition. But we're going to take Aiden Hutchinson. I just think that that's what's going to happen. This is chalk so far. The favorites for 1, 2. And then we're also taking the favorite for 3 as well, which is Derek Stingley. And at this point, I think a lot of people think that it's going to be Ekwonu. I think some people think it's going to be Evan Neal. I've even seen some Sauce Gardner takes. And I don't hate it. The reason why I go corner over offensive line is because pretty much the buzz that have been coming out of the Texans is that they have Laramie Tunsil at left tackle. Now, it does seem like in the future he could get traded, but they have Laramie Tunsil at the left tackle spot, and then they have Titus Howard, who they they moved down to guard. He's a right tackle that they drafted. They moved him down to guard, and apparently he's played way worse since that move. So he is much more of a natural tackle, and I think that it seems like the Texans are going to roll with Laramie Tunsil on the left side, Titus Howard on the right side, and from there, what that would lead you to is the defensive side of the ball with, Lovie Smith and that whole like head coaching regime that they have in place. Now, I've heard that the front office has some kind of ties to LSU, and they love Derek Stingley. I think people are going to think that it's wild to take Derek Stingley over Sauce Gardner. As of right now, Derek Stingley is the odds-on favorite to go third overall at like plus 175. He is even, he doesn't have better odds than the two guys in front of him, but he is the favorite to go third overall at this point. I think that anybody that's justifying Derek Stingley at like third overall pretty much saw his freshman tape. Again, I can't even refute it. I think Derek Stingley is, again, this isn't for me to fire off takes, but Derek Stingley, what he did as a true freshman, he was like the best cornerback in the entire league. He was guarding like wide receiver ones in the SEC. He was guarding Justin Jefferson and Jamar Chase every single day of practice. Like, he was just thrown into the fire as an 18-year-old, and he thrived. He played great. So I don't know. He could be the next Jalen Ramsey. He could have just been a flash in the pan in year one, but he's a freak athlete. That first year is just too much to discount, in my opinion. And that seems like that's the direction that the Texans are going to go. That's what all the buzz has been about the last 2 days, is that the Texans want to go Stingley. Now at 4, my Jets, I'm a Jets fan, is where it gets tough. Because if I was here on the clock, I would just want to take offensive linemen, or O-line, Thibodeau, and corner make the most sense. The problem is that we have two things going on here, because Sauce Gardner makes a ton of sense, but the Jets in that Saleh scheme, like that 49er scheme, that Legion of Boom scheme, they don't like to invest heavy draft or high draft capital in those corners. They believe, inside of those walls, they believe that DJ Reed, who even are these guys? Michael Carter in the nickel. You have Bryce Hall. You have, I want to say the other guy that they have is like Eccles that they don't mind. A lot of like ragtag names that if you were like, hey, does this secondary look strong? You would say no. But it seems like Saleh's scheme is that he wants to get to the quarterback and not rely on his coverage. And I think that because of that reason, I think that corner's off the table. I think O-line is on the table just because of the Mekhi Becton talks. And, apparently Mekhi Becton blew up to like 400 pounds after he dislocated his knee or whatever. And there's talks there where there's like some frustration. But there's a lot of smoke screens going on with the Jets where apparently Joe Douglas is like this tight-lipped individual is what everybody says about him, yet there's like a million rumors going on where we have 2 days ago it was Jermaine Johnson at 4. The next day it was Ike Ekwonu at 4 because Mekhi Becton like blew up and is no longer really in the plans for the future. The reason why I think that it's not going to be tackle or corner, I don't think it's going to be tackle, because I've also heard that Saleh has been in touch with Duke. I want to say his name's like Duke Merriweather, the O-line guy on Twitter, who works really close with Mekhi Becton, and he's been training like in Texas or something. That's why he wasn't at like the voluntary training camp, which was like this, or involuntary training camp, which like this huge like story in the national media for football. But it seems like I think that it wouldn't be good process for Joe Douglas to cut bait on his 11th overall left tackle he drafted 2 years ago. If you cut bait this early and you trade him for like a second or something, you're getting to a spot where he starts to kind of come under fire for that. So you have Mekhi Becton. You also just locked George Fant into a long-term deal today. Now, they could draft Ekwonu and kick him inside. He has some left guard experience, but I don't think that you take a player at 4th overall that's going to kick inside and play left guard. So what I think it comes down to is Kayvon Thibodeau and Jermaine Johnson. From there, it gets tough. Jermaine Johnson has all of the buzz in the world. I just don't think that the Jets would be this loud about it. It doesn't make a ton of sense to me. I know Kayvon Thibodeau is tough in that like he has that like weird personality thing that a lot of people talk about, and it's kind of overblown at this point. And you can say Robert Saleh and Joe Douglas might not be into that. I just have a hard time with Jermaine Johnson, man. At 4th overall feels really high. And on top of that, he's like 23, and 23 is a big deal. Being 23 is a big deal. His tape, like Jermaine Johnson was super productive and his tape looks great, most likely because he was 23 playing against 19 and 20-year-olds in his final season. Also, he doesn't have like the same ceiling as like other guys as pass rushers. If you're 23 already when you come into the league, you're already pretty much at like your peak. If you draft somebody who's 20 years old going into the league and he's like as good as Jermaine Johnson, he has that much more room to grow, which is I think what you're getting in Kayvon Thibodeau. I do truly believe that I really do think, as a Jets fan, I do think that it is kind of a smokescreen where it was Jermaine Johnson 2 days ago. Now it's Ike Ekwonu because of the Mekhi Becton thing. I do think that now with Trayvon Walker going first overall and Aiden Hutchinson in the fold at 2, I think they're trying to beat that Jermaine Johnson drum and, kind of throw a little bit of a smokescreen. I believe that it's going to be Kayvon Thibodeau. I really do. I think he's just too, he could just be the best player in this draft very easily. Even the best, you can make a case for him over Trayvon Walker, Aiden Hutchinson as the best edge rusher in this draft. As much as Thibodeau has weird flaws and stuff, I think it's dumb, all of the overblown personality stuff. If you want to call him a me guy and he doesn't love football, Aiden Hutchinson, a guy who's looked at as this pristine prospect, really bought into the team. He has a podcast named after himself on PFF that he started, the Aiden Hutchinson podcast. He's gone on the Pat McAfee show and is peddled whatever brands he needs to peddle. To call, everybody is looking out for themselves these days in the NFL. I just don't see, I don't know. I mean, it's not I'm interviewing the guy and I can see it myself, but I think it's a little bit overblown. I do believe that the talent eventually wins out, and I think that Joe Douglas knows that. So I don't know, man. I feel a little bit rough about it. But we'll go Thibodeau there. That is where this draft, number 4 is where you really have to start making decisions. Now, at 5, I know we were talking a while there about the Jets, but at 5, I have Evan Neal. And I know that Ekwonu is the odds-on favorite to be the first tackle selected. The reason why I'm going Evan Neal here is for a few reasons. This feels a lot like when the Giants took Andrew Thomas, I believe it was 2 years ago, in that 2020 draft class. When you had Jedrick Wills, you had Andrew Thomas, you had Mekhi Becton, you had Tristan Wirfs, and no one knew who was going to go first overall. Andrew Thomas wasn't the odds-on favorite. I believe it was Jedrick Wills. And the Giants kind of took everyone by surprise, took Andrew Thomas. I think this is going to be a similar spot where they take Evan Neal. Evan Neal played right tackle when Leatherwood played left tackle. I believe that he got selected by the Raiders 2 years ago. Evan Neal has right tackle experience. They want to get a tackle on the right side to have Andrew Thomas on the left side. Ekwonu doesn't have right tackle experience, neither does Charles Cross. I think that this makes a ton of sense for them. Evan Neal, I think, if you want to take him draft prompts, first tackle off the board, I don't mind that bet at all. So we're going to go Evan Neal. And then at the 6th spot for Carolina, this is going to be a tackle. I believe that this is going to be Ekwonu or it's going to be Charles Cross. I don't believe that it's going to be Kenny Pickett or Malik Willis at this point. I think that it's going to be a tackle. This seems like a team that has their back against the wall. They need to win games. And at this point, I think their most likely path at quarterback is they're going to trade for Baker Mayfield or Jimmy Garoppolo because they're kind of in a spot where they have leverage with those teams where instead of trading for Baker Mayfield and paying him $18, $20 million a year, or same thing with Jimmy Garoppolo, neither of those teams have gotten any action on those quarterbacks. And after the NFL draft, there's just going to be less demand for those quarterbacks. You're going to see a trade that happens where it could be Carolina trades a 5th round pick for Baker Mayfield and Cleveland Browns pay a quarter to a half of the salary. So you can get one of those two quarterbacks on the cheap or on the cheaper side of things for quarterback and then attack a position of need like tackle. Now, I think that edge, corner, all of that is kind of off the board. They already have Brian Burns, who's great, J.C. Horn, who's great. So to me, I think if they're going to take a swing on quarterback, it probably happens in the 2nd round. I think this is also a spot where the Carolina Panthers could trade out of, but Ekwonu, they can't go wrong there. I think that is just the safe pick for them. Now we move on to the Giants' 2nd pick. And this one's very much a lock for me. This is Sauce Gardner. He's plus 300 to go here as the odds-on favorite. And apparently they have James Bradbury, who is in contract talks and they can't figure anything out. Adoree Jackson's overpaid. And a lot of these players on this Giants roster with Brian Daboll coming in and Wink Martindale coming in, it seems like, and I think they have a new GM too, it seems like a lot of these guys, none of them pretty much besides Andrew Thomas is really a long-term answer anywhere. And I guess Xavier McKinney, I don't know the roster super well, but there's not a ton of guys on the roster that are long-term answers at any of these positions. And what I've been hearing is that the Martindale system, the Wink Martindale system on defense, they really thrive on press corners and man corners. And that's exactly what Sauce Gardner is. So I think that in whatever world of any way that the draft shakes out, I do believe that Sauce Gardner and Derek Stingley are gone by the 7th overall pick. One of them is going to the Giants. Now at the 8th spot, this is where it can just go completely array, because at the 8th spot, I think Kyle Hamilton could make sense. I think a tackle could make sense. The Falcons, you guys can see what PFF is saying here: quarterback, guard, center, D-line, cornerback. They literally need help everywhere. There's been buzz recently that they want to take Drake London. I think it makes some sense when you look at Arthur Smith, the head coach, where he just came from a system with A.J. Brown and Corey Davis and a lot of these like big, tall wide receivers. So for me, I think that Drake London makes sense. It seems like he was joking around the other day that he wanted like big basketball players on his team with like Kyle Pitts and Drake London. It makes sense. Now, this could be, I went back and forth on this. I think this could be Jamison Williams. I think it could be Garrett Wilson. My gut feeling at this pick is a wide receiver. The buzz right now is Drake London, so that's the direction I'm going to go. But if it was like Jamison Williams, because they know they're not going to compete, they have Mariota at quarterback, Calvin Ridley is on like a year-long suspension, it would make sense for them to take Jamison Williams and have him sit for a little bit, and then from there, they could just, have Jamison Williams in there, a crazy deep speed threat. So they're one of the teams that have the luxury of not needing to win now. But I do just think that there's just too much buzz with Drake London that I think that he goes there. Now, at number 9, we have Seattle. And they are another wild card because Pete Carroll does whatever he wants. This could be Jermaine Johnson. This could be like Jordan Davis. He could go a lot of different directions. But I think that on a team like that they have right now, where they can't even name their tackles are terrible. Part of the reason Russell Wilson wanted out is because the O-line was so terrible. Charles Cross falls into their laps here. At this point, I think it's just what has to happen. I think that he's the best player on the board. It makes the most sense. Again, Seattle's a wild card. They could very well not be Charles Cross. Is it going to freeze on me again? All right, hold on. All right, that happened last time, but we're back here. And now we have the Jets at 10. And this is a tough one for me as well because I think if they go edge at 4, 10 needs to be a wide receiver. Now, it really just comes down to Jamison Williams or Garrett Wilson. And it gets tough because I do think that they are going to be higher on Jamison Williams. But what it comes down to is I really do think that they want a difference maker from day one for Zach Wilson. And if Jamison Williams misses any time, he doesn't really fit that bill. But I am going to go Jamison Williams here. He is the favorite to go 10th overall at plus 300. He has that crazy speed. I do think that after Joe Douglas was like seconds away from Tyreek Hill picking the Jets, I do think that he's going to fall in love with that speed aspect. I don't think that Garrett Wilson gives them anything that they don't already have. They already have a pretty good like intermediate type separator from Elijah Moore. They have Corey Davis on the outside. I think Jamison Williams really gives them a vertical threat, whereas Garrett Wilson can do everything well, but I think that Jamison Williams just kind of gives them a different dimension to their offense. And I think you can really talk yourself into letting Zach Wilson have a crazy deep threat like Jamison Williams so he can just throw it deep. Now, if Drake London was here, I would have taken Drake London because I do think that the 50-50 ball contested stuff makes more sense for Zach Wilson. But with Jamison Williams, I mean, we saw last year where he Zach Wilson rolls right against the Titans, like points deep, chucks it to Corey Davis. If you can just get him a speedster like Jamison Williams and let Zach Wilson just kind of improvise outside of the pocket, I think that that's a perfect match for them. I will say that I think that Jamison Williams is trending towards playing week 1, and I think that that would be a little bit more, like depending on if Jamison Williams kind of clears the Jets' medicals, at that point, I think he would be the 10th overall pick. From there, we have another wide receiver. This is going to be Garrett Wilson. The Washington coaching staff apparently loves Garrett Wilson. There was this nugget. I think Josh Norris threw this out there, but Ron Rivera doesn't go to pro days very often. The only pro days that he's attended since like 2011 were Cam Newton's, Patrick Peterson's, Christian McCaffrey's, and then the Ohio State wide receivers in March. I don't think it's Olave. I think it's Garrett Wilson. I know that they didn't get Patrick Peterson, but I think that just wasn't by like design. He went really early in that 2011 class anyways. It makes sense. They could use another really good wide receiver out there. They have Terry McLaurin next to Garrett Wilson and just kind of build around Carson Wentz and have a more prolific offense from there. Now at 12, this is where it gets really tricky because they brought in the GM that was kind of like Sashi Brown's I guess I would call him not like protege, but kind of like, one of his guys. I think like Sashi Brown and just like the whole like Brown's like analytical family tree. I can't even think of his name. It's like, I don't even want to, there's a hyphen in it. I don't even want to attempt what the Vikings GM name is. But I think from here, the Browns have a type where they really want like young players and there's certain measurements. There's a guy on Twitter who's a Cleveland Browns fan. I'm telling you guys, I went deep for this. There was a Cleveland Browns guy on Twitter who looks at like all of the draft picks that the Browns and have made like the past 5 years and just kind of narrowed it down. Like what age are they usually at this position? Like what's their relative athletic score? And kind of the list that you get narrowed down to is that the Vikings GM, who was with the Browns, he's going to want a premium position. So that's going to be quarterback, tackle, wide receiver, edge, cornerback. Now, the guys who fit the mold of This is his name, Adolfo Mensa. I'm probably butchering that, but the guys who fit the mold are Sauce Gardner, Stingley, McDuffie, Carl Laftis, Olave, Garrett Wilson, Drake London, Jamison Williams. These are based on the Browns' tendencies, and I think what it's going to come down to here is McDuffie or Carl Laftis. I think maybe Olave is somewhat in question here. I really don't think so. I think it could have been a wide receiver. I know that they already have Justin Jefferson and Adam Thielen, but they're getting older now. Tyler Conklin leaves. They want to run a little bit more 11 personnel with their Rams coach. I think, what's his name? Kevin O'Connell. For me, I'm picking George Karlaftis here. If it's Trent McDuffie, I wouldn't be shocked at all, but Trent McDuffie, he has really short arms. I think that some teams are going to be put off by that. Karlaftis makes sense to me here just because he seems like a guy that a lot of sharp people love. And if this Adolfo Mensa guy is like sharp, super analytical, then George Karlaftis will be a guy that he likes. It's a position of need for the Vikings at edge. It makes a ton of sense. Now, I know that George Karlaftis has been like falling down boards, and I think it would be kind of wild for him to get taken over Jermaine Johnson, but the new Vikings GM, like, they don't draft old players. Like, it's all very much young players. They have these measurements, and they're at premium positions. So we're kind of fading Jermaine Johnson here, but I really don't buy the hype that he's like this top 10 pick, man. He's 23. There's too much, like, there's too much talent up top. I do think that he falls a little bit. Now, at 13, I think that this could very easily be a traded pick, but I just think that the Houston Texans need so much at every spot. I think this is where the Kyle Hamilton fall stops. You get another defensive back for Lovie Smith. You get Kyle Hamilton next to Derek Stingley. I think Lovie Smith would love that. They have a bunch of other draft capital. They could go out there. It does make some sense for them to get a wide receiver. I just don't think that they're going to take Olave there. They're really set on Davis Mills. It would make some sense to go out there and kind of get some wide receivers, but I think that they'll attack that later on in the draft, or they'll probably trade back from this spot. But if they stay there, they'll take Kyle Hamilton. Now, if you're asking, like, how come there's no trades in this draft, I think making trades in a mock draft you're trying to do for accuracy isn't the best practice, just because, like, trades are so unpredictable. You have no idea who's going to get traded where, or like what teams even want to get trade talks started. So it's not something I consider. Now, at 14, this is where the Jermaine Johnson fall stops. I think this is pretty fair for him to go. Yeah, so Jermaine Johnson, 14th. And the reason why is, again, he's 23 years old. I'm not buying the top 10 buzz. With the Ravens, they have been a team that in the past, I found like this screenshot somewhere, or this like Twitter post somewhere, where a guy went through the last 5 years, top 100 picks, who is drafting the oldest players among the group. And the guys at the top were the Raiders, the Patriots, the Ravens, and like one other team I can't think of. But Jermaine Johnson, I think, really fits what the Ravens like. He is very good. He's going to be very good from day one. He's not a super high ceiling guy, but at 14, you're not mad at that. And he does kind of fit that, you know, Matthew Judon, Courtney Upshaw, just like, I guess, was it Darius Smith there for a little bit? Just like these random edge rushers that they'll find in the first round. He feels like a Baltimore Raven type guy. Now, after that, we're going to take Jordan Davis, who is just an absolute monster. He has like he's like the most athletic specimen of all time. Like, his size adjusted speed is crazy. And I think that Howie Roseman, a guy that likes to prioritize the D-line when you have guys like Brandon Graham and Fletcher Cox, and I think they drafted like Derek Barnett a while ago. I'm trying to think of some other names, but they do like bolstering that D-line. I think that Jordan Davis coming in there makes a lot of sense. He is just a unicorn, and I think that Howie Roseman will value that in this draft class. So I think it does make some sense. Now, I know that a lot of people think that they should attack wide receiver. I think that they kind of like what they have in Devonta Smith, Dallas Goedert. I think kind of addressing the defense is a little bit more pressing, especially with a unicorn like Jordan Davis falling to 15. I didn't say this earlier, but I could very easily see Jordan Davis going as high as like number 8 to the Falcons. He's a guy that I think that some team could just fall in love with. I think the Seahawks make some sense too, but we're taking him at 15 here. Now at 16, we have the Saints, and they have pretty much an empty wide receiver room outside of Michael Thomas. They have like Marquez Callaway, Traquan Smith. They have Adam Troutman. It's really rough. So if you have Jameis Winston there and you want him to succeed in any way, you should probably give Michael Thomas another option to just kind of play off of him. And I think that this is kind of where Chris Olave goes. I expect Chris Olave to go high. This is the 16th pick, so that's pretty high for him. And he fits into that, you know, wide receiver room where he can kind of get a little bit in the deeper range of things. And Michael Thomas can kind of operate in the shallower parts of the field. I think it just makes sense there. Now at 17, we have the Chargers. And I think that they go O-line here. Now, which O-lineman, I'm not sure. I think they could go guard, but I'm going to have him go tackle Trevor Penning. Apparently, Trevor Penning was a guy who, like, tore up the Senior Bowl again. It's not like I was at the Senior Bowl, but apparently he tore up the Senior Bowl, which like kind of being an asshole. Where like I heard he was like blocking, he was like throwing edge rushers like into his quarterback and like being a menace. But like some teams love those like just mean offensive linemen. And a guy who kind of reminds me of that is like Will Hernandez a few years ago, one of those like nasty guys from the Senior Bowl. Same thing with the guy the Broncos took. I guess his name's like Quinnen Myers or something like that, something in that range. But you guys get what I'm saying. The Chargers, apparently they cut Brian Bulaga. They I believe that they let their guard go in free agency. His name's like Schofield. They need help on the right side of the offensive line. They have one of the premier quarterbacks in the entire NFL. I think that their priority is to keep him safe, to keep him protected inside of the pocket. Trevor Penning makes a ton of sense. I think, here's the thing, I'm not an offensive line guy, but I think he can play guard if they need him to. I'm not sure. Now at 18, we have Philadelphia. They're taking Trent McDuffie. And Trent McDuffie's a guy who I think probably could go like top 12 if he didn't have such short arms. Again, I'm not a cornerback evaluator, but it's something that teams care about. It was like the measurables, especially on defense. They want long-armed cornerbacks. The reason why I have him going to Philadelphia is because Philadelphia plays a ton of zone. One of the biggest knocks on Trent McDuffie is that he played a lot of zone in that Washington scheme. I think it makes sense for Philadelphia. Washington has, I think they are like almost like they've had a ton of prospects come out of there where they had, I want to say like Sidney Jones. I'm blanking on anybody else, but like Washington's had some DBs come through there recently. So I think it makes some sense. I want to say the Eagles took Sidney Jones as well. I think it makes some sense. Now this could be a wide receiver, but I do think that they're going to address defense in this draft. I think it makes a little bit of sense. I think in the second round, that's when they'll probably address, either running back, wide receiver, whatever. Next, we have a pick that this is kind of where I'm sticking my neck out here. I think that the Saints are in play for a quarterback. It makes sense, but I do just think that I think it makes more sense for them to take Tyler Smith out of Tulsa. He's been getting a ton of late draft buzz here. 19 feels very high for him, but the Saints in the past have like reached on players before. I want to say like Marcus Davenport wasn't really a consensus like top 10 guy, and the Saints kind of like traded up to go get him. They've made some like, I'm not going to say that they've made bad draft picks or anything, but they've made ones that are a little bit more shocking recently. And Tyler Smith makes sense. They just lost Terron Armstead to Miami. Again, a quarterback makes sense, but I think that they want to give Jameis Winston a chance. It makes sense to give Jameis Winston a chance, and if he doesn't pan out this year, get your quarterback in 2023. Get Bryce Young, CJ Stroud, and whoever the Zach Wilson or like late riser in that draft class is. I don't think it makes a ton of sense for them to sit there and take quarterback. Now, they could take Kenny Pickett. They could take Malik Willis, Desmond Ridder. That's all in their range of outcomes, but for the sake of this mock, I'm going to go with Tyler Smith. Next up is where we have the first quarterback going off the board. Now, I know it's been a while. It is pick 20, and I haven't had a quarterback go off the board. It seems like if a quarterback goes like in the top 10 or top 5 in this draft class, it's going to be because some team just kind of acts out of character. It seems like everybody's pretty content on. I think the problem is that it's not even like Malik Willis is that bad. It's that there's 5 guys in that same tier of Malik Willis, Kenny Pickett, Matt Corral, Sam Howell, Desmond Ridder. Between those 5 guys, I think every team probably has a different combination of those guys in terms of their rankings of 1 through 5. So they're probably thinking to themselves, all right, if 3 of those guys go in the first round, we can probably get a different one, especially in the early second of those like top 10 teams. So like Detroit could just get one of those quarterbacks at like 34, or they could get whoever they want at like 32 or whatever. So it's tough for me to see a quarterback going earlier than like the Steelers to 20, unless if like, maybe somebody gets traded up, or I don't know, maybe Carolina trades back to like 12-ish or 13. Maybe they trade back to 13 and take the quarterback that they like there. Could make some sense. Moving on, we have the Patriots. In the last mock draft I did, I had them taking Zion Johnson, the guard. This time around, though, I debated Daxton Hill out of Michigan. I think we're going to go Devin Lloyd. He seems like a guy, I've heard that he has interviewed very well. He loves football, all of that stuff. He's also an older prospect, which the Patriots have kind of gravitated towards more often recently. He fits that mold. They need a linebacker. It makes sense. I do think that there's a couple different directions they could go there, but Devin Lloyd is where I lean for right now. Then at number 22, I think this is probably a wide receiver. I don't know if it's like Jahan Dotson or if they would go something crazy like Sky Moore. My gut tells me Treylon Burks. Treylon Burks seems like a guy that like could really slip. If Treylon Burks went in the second round of the NFL draft, I wouldn't really be shocked at all. People are really starting to sour on Treylon Burks, but we're going to have him go here. I want to say that maybe Aaron Rodgers at this point in time, maybe he has like a hand in picking these players at this point. I imagine that he would probably want Treylon Burks. He's like the biggest playmaker out of all of them. He looks good on tape. I don't know. There's a lot of this buzz where people don't like Treylon Burks. Apparently, he like put on weight after the season, or he like came in heavy to the combine or something among those lines. Maybe not to the combine, but that he came in heavy in the offseason. Some other questions about him. He's somebody in this range. If not the Packers, I think he goes to the Cardinals. Now, the Cardinals are sitting here. They wish they could have leapfrogged the Packers and gotten Treylon Burks. And I think there's a chance that they do go Jahan Dotson. But for the sake of this mock draft, I'm going to have them going Zion Johnson because I think that they want to help protect Kyler Murray. We've had like 2 or 3 years in a row now. I want to say 2 years in a row now where Kyler Murray plays well to start the year, and then he gets hurt, he comes back, and he plays injured. He's not the same. I think it makes a lot of sense to build up that offensive line. They get Zion Johnson at a spot of need at guard. They're a team that needs wide receiver and they need edge, but with Karl Aftis gone and Burks gone, I think that Zion Johnson makes the most sense. Then we have Dallas, who I'm pretty firm on taking Kenyon Green out of Texas A&M. He can play inside any of the guard spots, and the Cowboys lost Lael Collins and Connor Williams this offseason. They need offensive line help. I think that Kenyon Green makes the most sense. Now at 25, the Bills, they are one of the tougher ones I had to nail down. They need cornerback. They need D-line. They could go wide receiver. I don't think it makes sense if Treylon Burks isn't there, though. I mean, maybe a Jahan Dotson would make sense, but I really don't think so. And here I went Andrew Booth. I think they have the luxury to wait on Andrew Booth to get healthy. Apparently, he would be like a top 15 type pick if it wasn't for medicals. I think with Tre'Davious White coming off an ACL tear, I think their like number 2 corner is gone in free agency. They need a corner. I think Andrew Booth makes a ton of sense. If Andrew Booth went in like the top 15, it wouldn't shock me either. Moving on to 26. This is kind of my wild card pick of the draft, but I think this is where Kenny Pickett goes. Jeez. PFF is low on Kenny Pickett, 42nd. 42nd. So Kenny Pickett goes at the 26th spot to the Titans, and I think it makes sense at this point. Ryan Tannehill is a good quarterback, but I do think it's time for them to start kind of exploring other options, kind of using Tannehill as that Alex Smith type bridge quarterback. I do think that deep down inside the decision makers there are thinking to themselves, Tannehill is great, but they've now had 2 playoff runs with him. They went on a little bit of a run with Derrick Henry 2 years ago. Last year it wasn't so pretty. I think they're starting to think that they probably need a higher ceiling quarterback, especially in the AFC when you're out here competing every single week against Mahomes, Justin Herbert, Joe Burrow, Lamar Jackson. You need to have a quarterback. I'm not saying that Kenny Pickett's even that guy, but I could see the Titans convincing themselves that Kenny Pickett is that guy. Now, the next pick we're going to go with, the newly head coach, Todd Bowles, ex-Jet, at 27. I have him going Dax Hill. Dax Hill apparently plays safety. He plays some nickel corner. I do think that now that Todd Bowles, I know that he's not the key decision maker because he's not the GM, but I think it makes sense where I was a Jets fan when he was there. Todd Bowles, they took defensive players like almost every single first round with Todd Bowles there. I think it makes a lot of sense. Nickel corner. He likes those kinds of guys, the Sean Murphy Buntings and the Antoine Winfields, those like safety guys that can kind of play everywhere. Dax Hill makes sense there. Now at 28, this is where I was kind of stumped. I think there were a couple spots that made sense here. I think tackle kind of makes sense. I think you can go with like an edge rusher here, like an Arnold Abikidi or a Boye Mafe. You could even go Quay Walker here. I debated, but we're going to go Devontae Wyatt. He's a Georgia guy. He's, I think, somebody that the Packers will like, where I'm not sure that they're too concerned about the age of these players. I think that they like the measurables of a guy like Devontae Wyatt, Georgia, all of those, stuff that like, I'm not going to say like the cliche stuff that you look for, but he does just feel like if he does make it this far to like 28, I think that the Packers do take him here. Now after that, I think that the Chiefs have their back against the wall to take a wide receiver here. Would not shock me in the slightest if they went Sky Moore or if they went George Pickens, but just for the sake of accuracy, I went with Jahan Dotson. And I don't think that transforms their wide receiver room overnight, but they get a really solid wide receiver to put next to Juju Smith-Schuster, and then whatever they're going to pull up between like McCole Hardman and whoever else is on that wide receiver depth chart. You have also Travis Kelce there. Jahan Dotson, again, it's not like he has 4.4 speed. He's not Tyreek Hill, obviously, but I think that he's going to give them a really nice, reliable source of hands. He's a good wide receiver, not a super high ceiling guy, but I think at this point the Chiefs don't really have a choice. They just have to take their best wide receiver on the board and take him at 29. Now, after that, I think corner makes some sense. I think like a Kyer Elam makes sense. I think a Kyler Gordon makes sense. But here, I am going to take Boye Mafe if I can find him. And he seems like, I think it's going to be Boye Mafe or it's going to be Arnold Obikity. It seems like Boye Mafe is just I might be butchering his name. I don't know if it's Boye Mafe, but he seems like a guy that one of these teams at the tail end here are going to take as one of those edge rushers that could mix in and be fine, kind of like the Jason Awe pick last year. I don't know if that's actually his name. I feel like the Buccaneers and the Ravens did that last year where they took one of those fringy edge guys and they played well. I think it makes sense here for the Chiefs. They have Frank Clark, they have Chris Jones, but outside of that, the D-line isn't great at all, so I think it does make some sense to sort of rejuvenate things and want to get after the quarterback. It does make sense again. I think it's secondary or edge here. Now, after that, we have the Bengals. And first, I had them taking a corner last time we did one of these mocks, especially because look at the Bengals. They have like Eli Apple as like their number one corner. Chidobe Awuzie is pretty good, but it's not a secondary that you love. And I think that does make some sense to go secondary, but I do think that when you have Joe Burrow, a guy who tore like his ACL, MCL, PCL, whatever, and you just want to protect him, and you already are sort of building a good offensive line, I think Tyler Linderbaum would just be like the cherry on top, where if they get Kyler Linderbaum and he plays center and they have the rest of that offensive line, they're looking great. I think they brought in La'el Collins. They have the one kid from Alabama at left tackle. They look good. If they get Tyler Linderbaum up front, he's the highest graded center of all time on PFF. Like he could be like the Quentin Nelson of centers. He could be. That's in his range of outcomes. So at 31st, I think that's a great pick. I think it makes a ton of sense. Now, at this 32nd pick, we're going to take a quarterback here. But here's the thing. At first, when I did this last time, I was like, okay, fifth-year option. I think the Detroit Lions take a quarterback here. I think that makes some sense. But it does seem like the fifth-year option isn't as much as it used to be, because it does seem like for quarterbacks, even if you exercise that fifth-year option, you're still paying like $18 million for that quarterback. So it's not as much of like a cheat code as it's made out to be. But I do think that they're going to want to take a quarterback here. And if it's not the Lions, I think a team could come up to 32, do the Lamar Jackson thing, take a quarterback here. And I think a player who's in play as high as like the Seahawks at 9, a guy who I want to have in my first round. I think he's in play at like the Seahawks at 9. I think he's even in play with like the Saints at like 19. Desmond Ridder. I think teams quietly are a lot higher on Desmond Ridder than we think. And I think that he probably goes ahead of like Matt Corral and Sam Howell. And he could easily go ahead of Kenny Pickett or Malik Willis. So we're going to go, geez, are they that low on Desmond? Oh, okay, I'm an idiot. Desmond Ridder right there. So that is the mock draft. Is it going to show the whole thing in its entire glory? Come on, PFF. You can load it. You can do it. Should I zoom out? We'll zoom out, take a final look at it, just to have it here at the end. Boom. There we are. So I'm going to hop off here. I'm going to upload this to YouTube ASAP. I'm going to submit this into the accuracy competition. Hopefully I do well. We'll see. Let me know your thoughts down below. As always, if you enjoyed the video, make sure you go down below, subscribe, leave a like, and I will see you guys in the next one.
I got the juice, I got the juice.
10-0, Chatham's on. Foolies glad I'm home. Even my haters kinda glad I'm on. Rest in peace to my vagabond. Rapper, song, singer, suspended, subpoena from misdemeanors.